Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, you had your lunch, you networked, and treated yourself to some delicious ice cream, and now you're seated comfortably here, so much so that you may even feel like closing your eyes. No, you're not going to do that because this next session is going to be exciting and truly inspiring. Speakers, no pressure. This year, once again, I have the great privilege of introducing four spectacular Malaysians who are pushing the frontiers of knowledge, creativity, and conservation. Their stories will highlight the power of passion, resilience, and purpose, and remind us that navigating risk often begins with the will to ask, to see, and to protect. Our first speaker brings us to the farthest frontier, the universe itself. His life has been shaped by a love of fantasy literature, with fencing and archery as his longest sporting pursuits. I'm not sure if he was training for the Hunger Games back then. Now, living in the Alps, he has traded them for cycling and skiing. A physicist with the Atlas experiment at CERN, the world's largest physics lab located in Geneva, he's also a research assistant with the Humboldt University of Berlin. Today, he will share what exactly physicists at the Large Hadron Collider have been doing since the Higgs discovery in 2012. He hopes Malaysia will continue progressing towards a sustainable future by developing talent and serving the needs of our diverse and energetic society. Let's put our hands together to welcome Dr. Khoo Teng Jan.
Hello? Is it on? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Edmund. Let me first say it's an immense pleasure to be here speaking to you about my research, not least because this is also a 20th anniversary for me since I left to these shores to study overseas. So I'll share with you a little bit today about what it means to use the biggest machines in the world to study the smallest pieces of the universe. I spent the last year at CERN outside Geneva on the French-Swiss border as a scientific associate. CERN is Europe's and the world's premier particle physics laboratory, home to the largest particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, with its four major experiments. Colliding protons and ions, these deliver data to over 10,000 physicists worldwide. And especially in Malaysia, speaking about smashing protons may sound a little primitive and unfortunate. I'd like to use a slightly different analogy. We deconstruct rojak to understand what makes it up. I'll tell you a bit what I mean by this. Let's start with the central question. It's been a pervasive and universal question for the ages. What are the basic ingredients of the universe? What are the smallest pieces of matter? And through the 19th century, we developed the ability to investigate some of this, starting to identify the chemical elements, thought then to be immutable, and then understood later through the lens of atomic theory to be more divisible. And in the 21st century, we can investigate particle physics not by speculation, we can measure. The picture that we have of particle physics is a dance of the particles of matter interacting with one another through force carriers, also particles. And I'd like to illustrate this with the classical picture of the atom, where in the nucleus, this strong positive electrical attraction holds on to the electrons in their shells. In our language, they're exchanging a constant stream of messengers, the photons, the carriers of the electromagnetic force. Mirrored deep inside the nuclear structure and the structure of the proton is another um, universe with a trio of quarks held together by the strong nuclear interaction through the exchange of gluons. And the similar particle interpretation can be put on the weak nuclear interaction responsible for radioactive decay, as well as the gravitational force. I'm only going to show you one equation today. Don't be intimidated. This is, in a very abbreviated form, the Lagrangian formulation of the standard model of particle physics. It's our mathematical description of how all the particles interact with one another through the language of quantum field theory. This is the most precisely tested theory in physics. Our role as experimentalists is to try and find flaws, reveal something that lets us go beyond. The content of the standard model is illustrated on this slide. All of the matter particles are on the left. There are 12 of them, but everything you see around you, everything you know and love, is made up of only 3. The up quark and the down quark, as I've mentioned, make up the protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and the electron. Those are the only stable ones that we actively interact with. All the rest of these are surprising, curious, because for reasons that we don't fully understand, there are multiple copies. Yeah, the second and third generation of these particles are very heavy, very short-lived, unstable. So if we create them, they instantly decay, falling back down to the stable particles of normal matter. On the right side, you see the force carriers, the bosons. I've spoken already about the photon, carrier of electromagnetic force, and the gluon for the strong nuclear interaction. The weak nuclear force is carried by the less poetically named W and Z. As of yet, we don't fully integrate gravity into our theoretical picture in the Sand model. Given pride of place, however, is the Higgs boson. It's neither a force carrier nor a matter particle. It is intrinsically linked with the mechanism by which other particles gain mass. And the 50-year quest to demonstrate the existence of the Higgs boson is what put the capstone on this complete theory. So the observation was in 2012 to exacting statistical standards, 5 sigma, our judgment that there's a less than a 1 in a million chance that this was a fluke. Here's an animation of collisions in the LHC. The collider is a series of thousands of magnets that steer beams and focus them down, squeezing them down to less than half the width of a human hair before they collide. We need these high energies to access the internal structure of the proton and effectively collide the quarks. When they come together in an interaction point in one of the detectors, such as this one is my home experiment Atlas, we're using Einstein's celebrated E equals mc squared, translating that high energy into heavy massive particles. It's like we smash together 2 little langsat and get out a jackfruit, a durian, something huge that immediately collapses into rambutans, chikus. That's the fruit salad, the rojak. Okay. But these interactions, they're quantum mechanical. They're full of randomness. But behind that randomness, there are rules. And so we analyze billions of collisions to understand the patterns and correlations between what we get out. And that is how we test the standard model. But the collider is not enough. We need a detector. And these detectors are huge. My detector, Atlas, it's 100 meters underground. It has the footprint of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Or in height terms, it's almost as tall as the pagoda at Kaiwasi. It functions like a 100 megapixel camera. Okay, not very impressive. Our phone got 50 megapixels now. But these are specialized sensors in 3 dimensions, built to be extremely tolerant to intense radiation and unlocking the particle properties as they pass through. So in this graphic, you see we are colliding, it's a cross-section of the detector, we're colliding the beams in the center, and the particles are spraying out. They first pass through our inner detector, a lightweight, high-precision device, mostly made of silicon, that allows us to track these particles through their lines as they move through the detector, and then they slam into heavy metal calorimeters built of lead and steel, which are meant to stop the particles entirely and measure their energies. A few select particles pass through them, the most important visible ones being the muons, this red line here, and that's why we need this huge volume to track them as they continue going and hit these specialized detector elements. But this equipment needs operators. Atlas is a complex experiment needing a ton of expertise, and therefore we rely on a global collaboration. Look around the room, it's 600 people here. Multiply that by 5 for the number of signing physicists, and then double it again for the technicians and engineers who help us operate this. Of course, I'm extremely proud to be one of the members, otherwise faceless. But we're a global community, and therefore we face global challenges. the energy crises, supply chain disruptions, tightening borders limit academic mobility, and of course, financial strain disrupts our work as well. Nevertheless, we persevere. And now I'm going to move on to the question, what are we doing these days? We found the Higgs 13 years ago, job done. No, we've got, for this machine, we have plans until the 2040s. And let me just give you a taster of recent work. In the decade since the Higgs observation, we've amassed more than 10 times the amount of data. That's about as much as we have fully analyzed. And with that, we push forwards our understanding of this particle in high precision, great detail. And let me show you one of the key results. It shows us, this line shows us that the Higgs boson plays favorites. Because it's tied to the mass generation, it loves to interact with heavy particles more than it does with light ones. So if we correlate the strength of this interaction with the mass of the particle, regardless of what kind of particle it is, the force carriers, different types of matter particles, quarks or leptons, they all lie on this line. One of the triumphs so far of the standard model. We're not only colliding protons, we also collide lead ions. Oops, sorry, went too far. In these heavy metal collisions, they're big, heavy nuclei. It's very messy. So, you know, where we got rojak before, this is more like nasi kandar kuah banjir. That's how I like it. So then you make this fluid of quarks and gluons, and swimming in that curry, all the different particles interact differently. And therefore, by measuring them, we can probe the interactions. We can understand different, in this context, how the strong force behaves. But they're not homogeneous, these collisions. This is also a lead ion collision, or an almost collision. It's like ions passing in the night, exchanging particles of light. The photons, like almost like something out of Star Wars, they're bouncing off each other. Right? You wouldn't imagine that from light. That gives us an incredibly clean signal. Oops. Nothing seen in the detector except these two pinpricks. Extremely characteristic. Lastly, I want to get on to some of the work that I've been doing for the last 5 years, a search for pair production of Higgs bosons. Buy one, get one free. It's an extremely rare mode of production, 1,000 times less common than single Higgs production. We look for this in the correlation of pairs of particles, 2 photons in this case, in this a candidate event, and 2 bottom quarks. But it's a long-term project. It'll be another 10 years before we can extract this from the backgrounds, and so we're progressively building up evidence for this process. Let me move on to the other major element of my research in the last 5 years. This is the trigger system for Atlas. It's how we select the data that we collect. These collisions, they're not one and done. We're colliding continuously for hours. And the rate is 30 million collisions per second. If we look at the data rate, it's as though you had K-pop Demon Hunter streaming 4K on 30,000 TVs at once. We need 50 terabytes per second. And if you're buying consumer hard drives, that's 5,000 ringgit per second. We can't afford that. We're publicly funded. So we need to cut that data rate by a factor of 10,000. Let me use a different analogy, as though we're putting up a camera trap in Taman Negara. Forget about the Higgs for now. We're looking for charismatic megafauna, tigers and tapirs. If we're indiscriminate in recording every animal that passes by, what do we get? Siapa nak gambar nemo? So we have to filter. And for that, we use a series of selections. First, fast electronics operating at deciding in 2 microseconds. We have handcrafted as well as machine learning algorithms on them. They assess whether there's high energy or many particles in an event. And if successfully selecting, then pass it on to a dedicated CPU farm, processing about 100,000 events in parallel with about half a second on average to refine that picture and decide if we've got a tiger and get rid of our pesky backgrounds. My role in the trigger actively started in at the end of 2018 when we were wrapping up the second run of the LHC. We are now into the third. And I was responsible for triggering around jets. Jets are these messy objects. They're sprays of particles in the detector. They tell us about quarks and gluons, but it's quite hard to reconstruct them. So my work was on algorithms that combine the information from the inner tracker with the calorimeter to improve the precision of the measurements. And one of the effects that we need to correct for is that We're not colliding protons one at a time. We've got on average 65 every time we record an event. So you've got to just pull these pieces apart. We were making solid progress in 2019, aiming for a 2021 start, and then, like everyone else, we were hit by COVID. Living through successive lockdowns, our hardware got stuck in transit. We didn't have contact with our collaborators, and of course, like everyone else, we learned to work from home, learned to live on Zoom, and deadlines were slipping, but we had to pick up the pace of our solitary software development. I took on larger responsibility, that of planning and implementing a trigger strategy for all of the Atlas physics program, balancing our resources between the needs of different types of analyses like the ones I was showing to you before. So we carried on our work, got vaccinated, and gradually the world came back to life. And so did the LHC. I was extremely proud. It's one of my proudest moments to be in the Atlas control room, overseeing the reactivation of our trigger system as the collisions came in. First with the hardware trigger, and then a couple of days later with the software trigger. And everything ran beautifully smoothly. We've been taking data for 3 years now. In 2023, I was elected the Atlas trigger coordinator for 2 years, and I was managing 250 people in our trigger group, serving on the executive board, the highest level decision-making body in the experiment. And it's a curious leadership challenge because we're responsible for a group that we don't pay. They're employed by institutes all over the world. You don't see them. So how do we do this? We build a community united by a common purpose of delivering the best possible data to Atlas. And in that, we improve, we address challenges, adapting to the new hardware capabilities, evolving priorities of the experiment, and also building up our documentation and robust procedures to ensure resilience. So over 3 years, the collider has delivered us twice as many collisions as in the second run of the LHC. Using the trigger improvements, we've doubled the yield for physics, and this success is going to fuel the future analyses that we'll be carrying out. But I would hate to leave you thinking that this is a singular story. I'm not the only Malaysian out there doing particle physics. There are other really excellent individuals. I'm only going to share two, a couple of my close friends and contacts. First of all, I took this selfie with Fikri just a week ago at CERN. He's really a true homegrown talent. He started out, his degree at He was on the CERN summer student program, and then he went to further education in London and Oxford. He's now in Helsinki, Finland, where he's a leading light in the CMS experiment, a counterpart to Atlas on the other side of the LHC ring. And he leads their studies of jet physics. Kim Siang is a fellow Penangite. He went east, and then he went west. He's now settled down in Shanghai as associate professor at Shanghai Jiao Tong University and the Zhongdao Li Institute. He is a pioneer in the physics of muons, using these highly penetrating heavy cousins of the electron, not just doing precision physics, but also using them for non-destructive imaging. He has a mission to train Malaysians in all aspects of particle physics, and he's really interested in collaboration. So get in touch with him if you might be interested. Now, a little quiz for you. How far do you think it is to the closest active particle physics group? 20 minutes by car. hosts the National Center for Particle Physics. It has participation from UKM and UTM as well, and they've been the center of our partnership with CERN since 2013, working on the CMS experiment. Besides analyses in CMS, they also participate in experiments, Bell 2 and Comet, at the premier Japanese accelerator laboratory, KEK in Tsukuba. So you can find them on Facebook, get in touch with them, learn more, support them a little more. Okay, so that brings me to my closing statements, a bit of an outlook on the future of particle physics. Now, the LHC is just one of many global scientific projects with lifetimes in the decades. And now we are trying to plan and set up the Collider project for the second half of the 21st century. Where will this be sited? A couple of the prospects, CERN or China. The regional physicists are building support for this, but we need to persuade governments to be involved. One thing I can assure you is that Malaysians as individuals will be contributing. How could Malaysia do so as a nation? One of the essential elements will have to be sustained funding for local students to get involved and learn, for local research groups to develop their capabilities. That could be public, it could be private. But where's the opportunities? We're huge consumers of technology, very custom technology. So partnerships are essential. I think one of the obvious places that we think about it would be for competition for tenders would be in the silicon domain, because we need a ton of custom silicon for these devices. So with that, I'll close. Let me say once again, thank you for your appreciation, and yeah, the future is open.
Our next speaker has dedicated her life to studying and protecting marine mammals in Malaysia. She co-founded the Marisat Research Organization, the country's only NGO focused on marine mammals. You see, her great-great-grandfather, Tycoon Leong Chun Chong, built the Leaning Tower of Teluk Intan in 1885, while she herself, in her own way, is building pathways for a new generation of Malaysians in marine science and conservation. She aspires to see a Malaysia committed to biodiversity and environmental sustainability where people and nature can thrive together. Here to share her journey of swimming into a zone many thought too risky and pointless, let's welcome our very own aqua woman, Dr. Luisa Ponampalam.
Thank you, Edmund. Good afternoon, everyone. So from small, tiny particles, we will talk about large living organisms. What's going on in this photograph here? Well, I think this octopus was basically being hunted by this Indo-Pacific humpback dolphin. And it decided that to avoid being eaten, it would take the risk and climb onto its predator's body and cling onto it so that there was no way that this dolphin could get to it, right? So risk is everywhere. Even octopuses take risk. I would like you to meet some spectacular Malaysians, my study subjects. All photographs that you see of marine mammals in this presentation were all taken in Malaysia. I'm almost 43. I turned 43 in December. I've been studying marine mammals, in particular dolphins, for 21 years now. Yeah, thank you. But I actually only saw my very first live dolphin when I was 18 years old. But it was at 13 that I fell completely and obsessively in love with dolphins for a reason that I have I don't know why. But I fell in love with the sea even before that, in my early childhood, from many school holidays spent in Terengganu by the seaside. I was 10 when I told my mom that I want to be a marine biologist. And she just looked at me and said, okay, but I still remember she was probably thinking, what is that? So this love affair goes back a really long way. This is my scrapbook I kept as a teenager in the 90s and into the early 2000s. I was so obsessed with marine life that I would keep articles of anything marine life into this scrapbook. And it was even during that time that I already noticed, I saw pictures of dolphins being entangled in fishing nets. I remember a picture of a leatherback turtle stranded on the beach with a plastic bag in its mouth. And I recall feeling anxious and feeling like I want to do something to protect these animals. And I said to myself, someday when I grow up, that's what I want to do. Some of you may remember these posters from the 90s. A lot of my classmates and schoolmates had posters like that plastered on their room walls and on their school desks. I still remember the day when Take That broke up. There were girls in school crying. But I didn't care about any of that because on my room walls and on my desk at school, I had literally these photographs ripped out from the calendars of the previous year, and I had them stuck on my table. Baria's my schoolmate. She's here in the audience, and she can attest to that. So a lot of people thought I was a bit crazy, like, what's with this girl sticking dolphins all over the place? And when I told my classmates that someday I'm going to be a dolphin researcher, they laughed at me and just thought, what? What is that? It was during this time in the 90s that I was trying to find more information about dolphins in Malaysia, and I couldn't find anything. And I thought to myself, maybe there's a niche that I can fill, because if we don't have information, how can we know what to do for them? But there were no opportunities back then for me to experience whether this was a passing phase or if this was something I really wanted to do. Um, anyway, I went with my gut feeling, and I managed to go abroad. And I always said that I would want to go abroad to get trained because there didn't seem to be opportunities here back then. And then I want to bring all that skill set back and start something of my own to help build marine mammal science and conservation in the country. My parents were nervous that I was going down this path, but they supported me fully. And I was able to go to Hawaii to get my undergraduate degree. And then I went on to study spinner dolphins in the Arabian Sea in Oman for my PhD. This is me, fresh off of my PhD on a research expedition in the South China Sea. This was the moment was like, this is it. I'm finally qualified. I'm back in Malaysia. I can finally roll out this long time plan that I've had to become this dolphin scientist and study dolphins for the rest of my life and protect them in Malaysia. But what I didn't know was that there were people who actually thought that this was a stupid idea. There were actually learned people who said to me, you should just keep this dolphin watching thing as an annual hobby. You should go and do proper science. And I was taken aback at first and, of course, hurt and offended. And I almost gave in to that belief that, this is maybe not the right thing to do. Because they thought, are there even dolphins in Malaysia for you to study? But of course, I didn't listen to them. I said, I've given too much of my life up to this point to stop now. And so I didn't. And a little while after that, I met this chap here. His name is Fairul, and we got to work on a project together. And we realized that we both had the same interest for marine mammals, and we both had the same mission to develop this work here in Malaysia. So together, we established Mariset in 2012. And again, people laughed at us. They thought, are there even whales and dolphins for you to protect? How are you going to get this funded? You're going to shut down in 6 months. You might as well just join the larger NGOs that are already out there. But we were determined to do our own thing and carve our own path. And we really started with nothing. We needed money to open our bank account, and we didn't have money. So what did we do? Over 6 months, we collected people's unwanted items. I collected so much stuff that my mom even threatened to throw me out of the house. She said, please get this out of here now. Over 3 days, we ran a jumble sale, and we raised 5,000 ringgit, which is about $1,200. And we used that as our seed funding to start our operations and to open our bank account. So we really started small and went from there. One of the earliest stumbling blocks of doing this work is that the level of awareness was very low here. Lots of people didn't know that there are marine mammals in our country. So of course, if people don't know, how can they relate to it? How can they empathize and how can they care? So we decided that never mind the big environmental problems that are out there, but this is so fundamental. We needed to tell people that we have marine mammals in the country. We often get asked these questions, even till today, but at a much lesser extent. So to help answer some of these questions, I want to show you, are there whales and dolphins in Malaysia? This is not Bali, this is not Tahiti, this is not Hawaii. This is right here in Johor. These are pantropical spotted dolphins living their best lives. And they share this habitat with other species of marine mammals along our Malaysian coastline. What about these guys? These guys are whales. They're called Bruder's whales or Eden's whales. This is in Kedah. And I tell you, they are just as Malaysian as you and I. Why? I don't know if you can see from where you are, but what they're eating actually is ikan bilis. They're eating anchovies, right? Malaysians love ikan bilis. These guys love ikan bilis. Ikan bilis, the quintessential ingredient in so many of our Malaysian cuisine, right? One of the most important ingredients in our beloved nasi lemak. Okay, so they're just as Malaysian as me, as you, and they live right here. This beautiful footage that we took in Kedah shows a female whale and her calf feeding on small fish, a sign that our waters can support these large marine megafauna. It's important feeding grounds for them, and it's an important place for them to bring their young, to nurse them, to teach them how to hunt, and to live as a whale or as a dolphin out here. Yeah, we've been studying them since 2019, and for me, it's a dream come true because I always thought I would just study dolphins in Malaysia, and I never thought we'd have the opportunity to study these guys. Anyway, why is this all important? In a study of a global review that I was a part of 2 years ago, we found that 1 in 4 species of cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and porpoises, are threatened with extinction. And when we zoom into on the map, Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, is a global hotspot with the highest extinction risks of these species. And 3 of the most commonly occurring species that are found along our Malaysian coastline have made it into the top 7 list of cetaceans with the highest extinction risk. So basically, they are endangered and we need to protect them. This is happening here in our waters. This is also happening here in our waters, right? These animals do get caught in fishing gear, illegal or legal. Some make it out alive and some don't. This is also Malaysia. This is happening here. What we do on land impacts marine life and ecosystems out at sea. Whether or not we can see, right, doesn't matter. But we've observed this. We've saved turtles from these debris. We've seen the whales that we study be entangled with ropes that was inhibiting its diving and feeding behavior. So there are issues out there, and one of the things that we do is try to find solutions for them. So why do marine mammals matter? Is it just because I'm biased and because they're cute? No. Marine mammals matter because your seafood matters, okay? The sea can only give us seafood if it's healthy. The sea, the ocean covers about 70% of our Earth's surface, right? And it produces a lot of the oxygen that we breathe. Again, we don't have to be by the coast. We could be inland, but the sea provides. And the sea provides a lot of food resources and all kinds of ecosystem services. And these animals act as indicators of ocean health. Yeah? So if the sea is able to support them, it means that there's still enough resources for us to take as well. And that's why they're important. We use them as mascots for conservation. We use them as indicators. We've been talking to local fishermen, some who tell us that they no longer go fishing because there's no more catch. And actually, coinciding with that, we have been seeing in certain areas lower encounter rates with these dolphins. It's probably a sign that because there isn't much for them to eat, and so they've moved away or they've simply died out. So we need to look into that. How do we study marine mammals? Well, we spend many hours at sea, scouring the sea for signs of life. We look at their distribution, their abundance, their behavior, how they're using the habitat, are there overlaps with human activities. We put in acoustic recorders into the water to record their sounds, to figure out how is underwater noise affecting them. Here's a sample of what a Malaysian dolphin sounds like. I hope I can, oh, sorry. Is it okay if you help me click on just on the sound, please? On that box. So we can record these sounds and we can compare them when they are just by themselves and when there's human activities around and figure out what's going on. We also study what they eat, how they're using their habitat, where they are feeding, what's important for them. Are there areas that we need to protect? Because protecting these areas means protecting our own natural resources as well. We use drones to monitor them from the air to look at their behavior. We attend to cases of stranded animals. We try to ascertain the cause of death. We collect important samples to run tests in the lab to figure out what went wrong. And we do some molecular work in the lab as well to look at genetics, to look at population structure, genetic diversity, to understand if inbreeding could be an issue impacting these animals. We work with local fishermen to put acoustic pingers on nets to help deter dolphins from the nets so that they don't get entangled and die, and fishermen don't get their nets damaged. We run a lot of workshops with local communities, teaching them how to safely disentangle dolphins. We run a lot of workshops as well to train local community members, government agencies, students on how to deal with a stranded marine mammal if they found one on the beach. Yeah, so someone always has to volunteer to be a dolphin. It's always quite fun. Yeah. We have a program called the Sea Science and Schools program where we take kids into schools. We've traveled with our whale truck all over the country to bring the ocean into people's minds and into their hearts. And we share a lot of our research work with government agencies, policymakers, local stakeholders to try and find solutions for coexistence. Essentially, we've established MARSET as a platform to learn together, to explore. I didn't get those opportunities back in the 90s, and I wanted to create a platform as well for young Malaysians to participate in this. Fairul and I started out as two people. We were laughed at. In the early years, we relied really only on volunteers. And over time, our team grew, and it grew a little more, and it pretty much grew. Now this is the size of the team today. So I'm really so proud of how far we've come. Our field sites are now internationally recognized as important marine mammal areas based on all the research we've done. We've had recognition on various platforms. We've been able to bring our work to the international stage. That's me at a plenary in Spain, speaking to about 2,000 people about our work. And I'm here speaking to you at the Khazanah Megatrends Forum. So I'm really grateful for today. And just at the end of last month, we signed a MOU for a strategic partnership with the Malaysian government, the Department of Fisheries, to streamline conservation efforts and research efforts for marine mammals in the country. So it was a huge milestone for us. And I just want to close off quickly by saying, please join us in this mission. Please invest in our collective future. It is important that we keep marine mammals swimming in our seas, because if the ocean dies, we die too. We can't eat money, we can't eat steel, we can't eat plastic. Food comes from the sea, it gives to us, and we need to protect it at all costs. And these animals are indicators of how the sea is doing. So I'll just end, again, coming back to the theme of the forum about risk and uncertainty by saying, just because something is unusual or never been done before doesn't mean it cannot be done. And just because somebody thinks it's a crazy idea and it's bound to fail doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Risks and uncertainties are all part of life, so please, where possible, take a chance on the treasure and the khazanah that is Malaysia. Thank you so much.
Our third speaker has spent his career unlocking the mysteries of the human brain. Along the way, he was instrumental in reconstructing the face of the Perak Man, the oldest human skeleton ever found in Malaysia, giving us a glimpse of our ancient past. Apart from being a neurosurgeon, he is professor of neurosciences and chairman of Brain and Behavior Cluster at University Science Malaysia. This afternoon, he will tell us the story of how one of East Coast states in Malaysia rose to prominence in brain, mind, and neurosciences. He yearns for a Malaysia where institutions across the country work together to develop talent and pursue national excellence regardless of ideologies or backgrounds. Please don't get shocked when he comes on stage later. He looks a bit different than usual, like Professor X in X-Men wearing his cerebral helmet. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Jafri Malin Abdullah.
Okay. Can you start the video, please? I'm not using PowerPoint. I'm on 18-minute video. So forgive my Kelantan English if I tercakap Kelantan English. But I hail from Kota Baru, Kelantan, where we have a school of medical sciences there. And we are the only hospital Pakar USM outside of Kuala Lumpur in West Malaysia, of course. So I'm very adamant because I'm very stubborn-headed person, because that's why I put the topic just now. Not everything good happens in KL. So 30 years ago, when I arrived back from my training overseas sent by the government of Malaysia, I was trained in Ghent University. I went to Karolinska and University of Florida for my training in neurosurgery, and I had to do a PhD in neuroscience. Coming back to Malaysia, I had to change. Coming back to Kelantan, I had to change. I had to change my mentality. Tak boleh buat, tak say buat, tak buat, you know, to something boleh buat, nak buat, tapi kena plan, kena sembahyang banyak, doa banyak, pray banyak. I have to push and I have to innovate and collaborate. So when you look at what I did, I had to make myself into a good and trusted neurosurgeon in the state of Kelantan or East Coast. Catchment area 4.5 million people, lots of sick people. Tumors are 6 centimeter in size. In where I train, the brain tumors are maybe 1 centimeter or even less. I remember calling my professor. I said, "Prof, you never taught me how to remove huge brain tumors." Yeah, he forgot about that because in Belgium, all tumors in Sweden, tumors are small. Yeah, yeah. So my comrades did not trust me because I'm a neurosurgeon with a PhD. So they said, I must be a very bad neurosurgeon. That's why I'm running into PhD. Or if I'm doing PhD, I must be a very bad scientist because I'm operating people. But they did not know that being a hybrid person is very important. And so I had to plan to get stuff, equipment. I had to establish a department, the first department of neurosciences in Southeast Asia, thanks to Prof. Dr. Zabidi Azhar Muhammad Hussein, the dean at that time, thanks to Arwah Dr. Ramli Saad, the Pengarah Hospital of Hospital USM, who agreed to tolerate me buying neuroscientific equipment in a hospital university, including, of course, the surgical equipment as well. And thank you to Mahathir Mohamad, because our alumni wrote a letter to him. He tabled that letter in Parliament, and suddenly we received funds, about 40 million ringgit, to move forward. And what I had to do now was to get the human resource and the space. So we had to take spaces in our hospital that was not unused and explain to my engineering friends, and using certain budgets, modify the four walls, the roof to make a class 100, lab. It's not easy to make a special operation theater. It's not easy, but we managed to go through. And you see, from 1995 to the year of 2000, we did that. And I had to find human resource. So I said, where do I get my human resource? So I went to see 10 institutions. I said to them, give me your best student in biology, your best student in physics, your best student in chemistry, etc., etc. And the dean gave me this boy or girl, and I promised the dean that I would take care of this person until he did his PhD in neuroscience overseas. So we sent them overseas. I met with the professors. I chose where they should go, whether they should go to Switzerland, UK, Sydney, Australia, and many other countries, Germany and Switzerland. And then when they came back, we wanted to start the first course, our own local course, in Kota Baru, Kelantan, not in Kuala Lumpur, my dear. Very stubborn-headed, So we started the first course in Masters of Surgery, Neurosurgery. When I remember when we wanted to start the course, my comrades were saying, "Oh, you're going to produce stupid Malaysians who do not know how to operate the brain." But now the course has run for more than 25 years. It has been graded by the World Federation of Neurosurgery to be on par, and we tied together with the South Korean residency course in neurosurgery. And we started then to think. We kept reading newspapers, politicians saying, kita tak cukup psychologist, kita tak cukup psychiatrist, kita tak cukup neuroscientist. But we never do anything. So we decided to do it in Kelantan. We started our Master of Cognitive Neurosciences, The neurosciences cognitive course overseas is usually 1 year or 2 year course. And when the person graduates, he cannot do very much for the community. So we revamped the whole syllabus. I went to see 10 deans from the School of Social Sciences to business, to economics, to veterinary sciences, and we decided to have our Rojak Mama course of the Master of Cognitive Neuroscience, because you use the brain for everything. You use the brain to buy and sell. You use the brain to fall in love. You use the brain to go to the toilet, So there's so much we do not know about the brain in Malaysia. And we started other courses as well. And we the last 5 years, we started clinical neuropsychology and psychology in this, and we wanted to get lots and lots more students. So many students now get confused when they fill up the UPU form, or they thought they were coming to USM Penang or USM KL. But now they have to, oops, Kelantan, Kota Baru, Oh my God, nasi daging, nasi kerabu, That's the only thing. And floods, lots of banjir, That's what they think. But now, this is a totally different cup of tea. When you come to Kota Baru, Kelantan, you get surprised. And then another thing that we did over the years, with so much data that we gathered from the neuroimaging, the EEG cap. Now you see my brain is being activated on my left. It's getting excited. There's a wireless being transmitted to the screen. So we started a brain bank where we stored EEG data, MRI data, fMRI data, MEG data, because even scientists love banks, And then we were thinking, we have to go further. We have data, but we don't have enough smart people to work with the data. So we wanted to go international. So we work with the United States of America. We work with China. We work with McGill in Canada. And even thanks to Datuk Mahathir, Tun Mahathir, we work with Cuba. And in those times, the South-South collaboration. So the Cubans flew all the way from Havana to Kota Baru. And they were so surprised to see, do you have this equipment amongst the paddy fields? Interesting. And then they sent their postdoc, to work with us. In fact, one of their postdoc fell in love with one of our pegawai science, And they were very annoyed. They say, you're trying to steal our scientists. No. Love is blind. Love is blind. So we work with Americans, where we started. I joined the Brain Economy Hub, the Brain Capital Alliance, and I have been recently elevated from Global Brain Consortium International. Now there's a Global Brain Consortium Southeast Asia that I'm in charge of, which I have now to improve neuroscience in Southeast Asia. And recently we joined World Economic Forum, where with the topic of brain economy and brain capital, we are trying to push in Malaysia the concept of brain capital and brain economy, where brain health is so important to run the economy of Malaysia. Without good brain health, from baby till the elderly population, your economy is not going to move one single inch. So that's very important. So with this collaboration, what we did, we also had to share data with other countries, those countries that we mentioned just now, United States, America, China, Canada, and Cuba. We shared the data, and we have come out with papers, unimaginable, Q1 papers, together with collaboration, Malaysia boleh. Malaysia boleh share our brain data with the Americans, with the Chinese, with the Cubans, the Europeans, and we can come out with useful, big brain data that we can use now to see how we can help people with dementia, with strokes, epilepsy, and other diseases. So, just imagine, Kota Baru, bukan Kuala Lumpur. We are able to do that. And this is not alone. We collaborate with many other people within Malaysia as well. Our colleagues from UKM, USIM as well is involved, UIA, and now our next generation of our young people that are younger than me. Luisa says she's 43. I'm going to 63 soon. So I have to prepare the next generation of Malaysian neuroscientists to move forward. So I have to take these handpicked young people that you see on the stage, on the screen, to work with Columbia University looking at neuroclimate. You know that when something goes wrong with the climate, your brain health is not good. You know that pollution increases the incidence of dementia. You should know. And we work with the Chinese looking at big data. We work with the Germans. We work with so many other countries. And we hope that this young generation, because orang muda ni dia tak ada network. So kita kena tolong networkkan mereka dengan these people so that they will jumpstart. This is the grasshopper thing, of course. But after that, they will work like an ant lah. They have to. Because when you collaborate internationally with important data, this is what happens. So we hope that all these people, the photos that you see on stage are not only from USM, they're from UTM, they're from Kuala Lumpur, the university is local, and we hope that these people will do multi-center international activities that will make us proud. And we hope that they will be able to publish papers. Even now, as we speak, last year, the last 2 years, we've been publishing papers in international journals as collaborators, whether we are the principal investigator or whether they are co-principal investigators. So, Kota Baru is not a bad place, you know? Betul tak? Siapa orang Kelantan sini? Tak ada orang Kelantan. Ada, angkat tangan. Okay, be proud, be proud. And please come back to Kota Baru. Not to come back during Hari Raya, of course, but to come continuously and come and visit our campus and see within that walls that you see Hospital Pakar USM. You will see the people behind it that work very hard to improve brain science and neuroscience, psychology and neuropsychology. Orang tak sangka kan? Orang tak sangka yang benda-benda ni boleh berlaku. And you will not, when you walk in the campus, you will not see people walking around like with cats like me lah, you know. We do these experiments in the lab. And I just want to tell you that the journey that I just mentioned to you has been published in a live book by a Dr. neurologist from Penang. Her name is Dr. Yogi Akbi, where she has, there's a chapter dedicated to the journey of how we started from not many things to how we are today. And we hope that if you can Google this, you might get it on the internet. There's a chapter that summarizes what I just showed you on the slide about how we traveled from nowhere to somewhere. And my talk today is just to tell the young people out there, including you, those on the internet, is that if you have a dream, don't make it into a nightmare. Bring the dream to reality. Tak susah lah, because you're young. As I was young many years ago, I call myself the neural man or the neural gardener. And like I said, everything begins with a dream. To make a dream a reality, do the impossible, never say never, never say no, do not give up and follow up until the end. And another thing I have to mention is, which is important, my wife is here at the back and my youngest boy is here. Never forget your family when you're climbing up the mountain. Okay, sometimes you tertinggal dia orang. And even good things other than nasi kerabu, nasi lemak, nasi daging, nasi tupai can happen in a state named Kelantan. Okay, and the current count today, we have 146 neurosurgeons working everywhere, including Kuala Krai, including Miri, Tawau, Sabah. So they are everywhere. We have 120 scientists. They are working in NTU, NUS, Stanford. They get stolen. Dia nak cari kerja kat Malaysia ni susah sikit. There's no industry. We have produced more than 50 clinical psychologists. Some of them are working in the private hospitals in Kuala Lumpur. Maybe some of you are hiring them. I'm not very sure. And most importantly, the number of the female gender constitution of these specialists have gone up from 22% and increasing because the ladies are theoretically smarter than the boys. Even as surgeons, you know, I'll get a lady neurosurgeon to operate my brain tumor anytime. Uh, so, but being a neuro gardener is not easy, and you will be gardeners in your own right when you can push your dream to become true, and when you want to plant the seed, and the seed grows into a pokok. And in this case, the pokok is hibiscus because hibiscus is the national flower of our country. I wear white, that's why this AI generation, kat hospital I pakai putih, not black today lah, like today. So you see in this video, if you work very hard, you work like an ant, but occasionally once in a while you jump like a grasshopper, you can get, your dream will become true, and you will have a nice bunga raya, blossoming, colorful, and I think you'll be a very happy person. And this is what our contribution has been for the last 30 years to this country. And I hope this message to all of you online and in this hall is never give up, and teruskan mimpi, jangan jadi nightmare. Sebab kadang-kadang jadi nightmare, tapi things will look bright and things will work. Thank you very much.
Our fourth and final speaker is a national figure skater turned documentary and sports photographer and the co-founder of Women Photographers Malaysia. She has captured defining moments on global stages, from the Olympics to Time and National Geographic. Today, she's here to show how photography is a universal language, one that transcends boundaries, empowers voices, and creates opportunities for all. Beyond her lens, she once taught English and math at an orphanage, and she also practices Muay Thai for fun. So don't simply mess with her. At heart, she hopes for a Malaysia where every voice and story is valued and opportunities are not defined by privilege, but by passion and purpose. Please give your warmest welcome to Anis Lin.
Hi, everyone. When was the last time you actually came across a photo that makes you stop and look on social media or anywhere? Not because it's beautiful, but because it makes you feel something so deeply that you can't scroll past it. They say picture is worth 1,000 words, which is great because I'm much better behind the camera than with the microphone. So, yeah. But today, I want to try using both to talk about something a photograph can when words can't. This is a photo of an elderly man wrapped in the shredded remains of our national flag. It was taken back in June 2021 when I was on assignment during the white and black flag movement amidst of the pandemic. And yet I came across a tattered flag, and I call it tattered hope. For many, it reflects the state of our nation, the state of emergency at that time, a hung parliament, a rising unemployment, families going hungry, and a surge of suicide during the pandemic. Weeks after weeks, Malaysians raised the white flags as in desperation of hunger, and the black flags symbolize the frustration and a plea of leadership. As a photojournalist, I spent years chasing moments like that. Moment that speaks the truth, hold memories, and remind us of our shared humanity. Because photography, at its heart, isn't just about what we see, but about what we remember and what it makes us feel. As you sit here today, friends, amongst of the greatest minds, there's like literally 3 doctors before me, your peers, your mentors, your bosses, and as you continue to network your way through life and career progressions, I want you to remember this. You guys are not here to prove, you're here to improve. And as for me as well, it's the same. I'm not here to impress, but more so to express. Because when we stop performing, we finally start asking the 5W1H. Who are we when the lights are off and when no one's watching? What are we really doing here? And does it still move us? What are you doing here? When was the last time we paused just to breathe, to listen, and to feel? And also question yourself, when was the last time you guys do something for the first time? And where do we find meaning in all that we do, in your successes? And why do we keep showing up? And why are you here? Why are you here today? And at the end, how do we keep creating, loving, growing, even when the world feels heavy now? So, the moment we stop trying, then we prove ourselves. We make space to truly be our own self, where authenticity, connections begin, and where the real story begin. This is me, by the way, when I was young. Growing up, I was raised by 2 parents who were social workers. My dad is with us today, there you are. My parents showed me what it meant to live in humanity and purpose. Growing up, I had a lot of grandparents, and majority of my childhood friends are from the orphanage homes. And for both of my parents, they are the same people. They could be on daytime, they could be giving sponge bath for an elderly, counsel single mothers, helping broken families, and in the evening, put on a suit and raise funds for a cause. From them, I learned the importance and the fundamental of life because they always told me, "Girl, get your ABCs right." It's the simplest things, really. Now we are going back to school right now, which are just even though it's just letters, because that's the foundation. We have to get our foundations right of how we show up to the world as early as we learn from the kids. ABCs, right? In my dad's, which is ABC, which is attitude, behavior, and character. That's how we get our ABC right. Everyone, can you say that with me? Attitude, behavior, and character. And then that's what sets you apart. And for me, photography becomes the way I show up. And over time, I believe that the effects you have on others are the most valuable currency there is. And what you say, how you make others feel. And I see myself a lot in my parents. Before photography, I studied architecture. I thought I would design buildings, not stories. But photography found me and gave me a purpose. Because when you're amongst extrovert parents and you become the introvert one. And aside from being trained in architecture, I was also a former figure skater there, and pursuing winter sport in a tropical equatorial climate. And this experience allowed me to challenge the norm and start taking photographs, framing stories through lens by documenting a group of Malaysian in the ice skating community. So all in all, it's tied together being an architecture graduate, a figure skater, and a photographer. And these 3 have something in common, which is discipline, balance, and a pursuit of form and expression between technicality and artistry. Over the years, through plenty of trials and errors in photography, so aside from graduate in architecture, I also partly graduate photography from the University of Google and YouTube, which is self-taught. And this was one of the many first photos I've taken. It's Rachel Young, one of the national figure skater, back in 2015, I believe. And then fast forward as you learn, to try and error, explore, And this is the photo I've taken in 2022 Beijing of Kaori Sakamoto, a Japanese figure skater. What I love about photography, and I think majority of you, that the importance of documentation is that photography holds no boundary in regards to anyone's social status. It makes people feel seen, heard, and feel, and to provoke understanding. To give voice to the unheard, be it an indigenous boy or a world-class badminton player. Speaking another world-class, this is an actress, Michelle Yeoh. So during at that time, I was tasked to photograph, to cover her when the word homecoming, when she come back to Malaysia. And then you get the statue, you get her, and then you get like, where's Wally? And there's she. And I was very impressed by this lady as well with that selfie sticks right there. Very impressed. And again, like I said, photography holds no boundary to anyone's social status. It is a really great achievement, and even more so for us Malaysia. They say Malaysia boleh. The lens doesn't care whether if it's an Oscar or a nearly finished empty plate with just lentils and rice. It demands us to pay attention with what's happening around us. This is Mr. M and his family, a Rohingya refugee I documented back in 2021 July. I was tasked by NPR to photograph the food insecurity when it comes to COVID. So Mr. M allowed me to, in his home, actually cook for me and his family. And you can see what we're seeing right now. The hygienic situation or the lack of provision. And with using chili powder, lentils, long beans, just to add a little bit of flavor. And I remember one of the interview question I asked him, if money is not an issue at that time, what would you get for yourself? And he said, I would really want KFC. So soon enough, after 1 month when the work is published, I bought KFC for him. And then he actually I bought KFC for him enough that to actually last him for 3-4 days for leftovers. Leftovers are always the best also. I like leftovers. But he invited me to sit down and actually shared the other 3 buckets I bought with a doctor coming into to the village. He shared the 3 other buckets to all the flatmates and the children. Photography has taken me to places where borders are blurred. One week, I might find myself at the Olympics, capturing glories of world champions, positions, triumphs, and history being made. And days and weeks later, I might be deep in the Borneo, covering the complexity of rural vaccinations. And in both words, I ask myself, what does this mean? It means that to document not just what's happening, but also what's the state of humanity. Here is a quiet opening ceremony that keeps the world in times of uncertainty, which centers around this year's theme, risk and uncertainty, where we seek to explore the delicate between stability and adaptability in navigating global transition, with empty seats where no one is there as well. I was there to cover our Malaysian contingent and our very own athletes, such as Farah Ann, our gymnast, and their resilience when no one is watching, but still knowing that everybody is cheering back home. Pandalela. This is a match between Chen Long from China and our national badminton player Li Zijia at that time. Aaron and So Yik, where they managed to grab home a bronze medal for the men's double. And also these tiny moments that I encountered that we used to be conquered by Japanese during the Japanese occupation, and how years have passed, you will see a Japanese officer actually carefully holding our Jalo Gemilang. This is Coach Wang Chunhan when he sees our flags up. And also a portrait of Azizu Awang, our national rocket man, for securing a Kering silver. And then off to quarantine for 2 weeks. And then 1 week just to go back home and recalibrate. And 3 weeks later, I was by foot, on ground, to cars, on the bumpy roads, with all our lovely doctors, to helicopter flights, and by sea, by boat, in the efforts of documenting the complexity of rural vaccination and to document the efforts of it in our country's Ministry of Health. And here you can see how the doctors themselves working tirelessly to obtain vaccines. And then here we go as in the deep island of Sabah Mabu Island, when keeping your distance it doesn't apply to them as well. And we have seen a Malaysian doctor making sure that villagers are in order to receive vaccination. I particularly really resonate with this photo where a thing that can end a life, and then there's a pregnant woman here where life begins. Seeing that 9 family members living in a house under the pandemic in Pulau Gaya, a son carrying his father to lay on the sofa for the vaccine. Although I'm really impressed with the Hello Kitty collections right here. And to humanize every subject, we point at it in times of uncertainty. So on these kind of moments, there are like little great moments that appears where children make shift on their own, have their own imaginations, or a photo of a mom receiving vaccination, but then there's like a cute foot right here. So in terms of making sense of this, I'm still trying to at that time. So it was just from July and August, and then September. And I believe that whether if it's Olympic or through the corners of Malaysia documenting the rural vaccination, it requires the same energy, the same camera, the same spirits to do so. So every voice and story matters. Be it a child, a girl, a mom, or even an Olympic gold medalist, Iman Khalif, an Algerian boxer. She stands as a resilience figure at a time of controversy, ongoing debate over gender, identity, and fairness in sports. At the time, I was on an assignment with the Association National Olympic, where we were there to photograph portraits. And then she was here. She had all this thing going on with the ongoing controversy going on her. And then she looked down when I was photographing her. And I told her, Iman, you're like, I get inspiration from the tethered man, the man with the tethered hope. And I say, why not you just put on your national flag and then actually look up? So it's the same thing, but it's just a little tweak and different. And it really depends how you see things in life sometimes. Photography also sometimes represent and cast narrative on like the legacy of our national leader, turning 100 years this year. I was tasked to photograph 3 days before to shadow him. And it gave us a glimpse that he's not just a political figure going up knowing it, or how the media writes it, or how he portrays it, but a friend, a father, a grandfather, a husband, or even showing a long-lasting love story. And even an individual, what I see is at the age of 100, who is still able and willing in all that he does. And then we have our current leader as well. So we as photographers, we are accountable to what we put out there in the world. And in the meantime, to hold those in power accountable as well. And here is our Prime Minister. It was at the country that time he was there for the Batang Kali landslide in 2022, where unfortunately 31 people were killed. And I was there to cover it was sort of like a beautiful mess what I'm seeing, but it was devastating. So photography is a tool for change, to preserve the past and construct the future. And it's also a tool to inform, reform, and unite people. And with that too, we can claim credibility alone. I can claim credibility alone with all the photos we just seen, we just go through. We have to work together to paint the bigger picture, like you guys as well. The world doesn't need more photographers. It needs more storytellers. Be it using your pen, your voice, and whether you're in the right position to do so, to challenge the norm and create opportunities for others. And in one such project, 12 Malaysian and I, back in 2021, from February and April, we have the privilege to work with Malaysian artist Red Hong Yi, who used 55,000 green tip matchsticks to craft a powerful artwork on climate change. A reminder that even the smallest spark can ignite big conversation. So never underestimate what you do.
As time went by, Earth blossomed into a beautiful, natural vastness of green. Our human curiosity led us to discover its hidden beauty and its promise of the future. But in our strive to forward the human race, our Earth suffered the consequences of our choices. The pandemic has shown us what it is like to go through a dangerous emergency. That could happen if climate change accelerates. We destroyed Earth, but it is also us who can restore it.
A photograph is more than just an image. It's an evidence that someone or an issue matters. And if a single frame that holds that kind of power, imagine what can we do and what can we create when we use our all voices. Friends, here's the cover of the Time magazine April issue in 2021. And there's a saying that from the great Uncle Ben from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. But actually, with great platform comes great responsibility as well. And here are the incredible Malaysians behind the cover. Malaysia is truly our home and a beautiful country, like what Dr. Jeffrey just said. And for some reason, we are somehow not content. We always often feel the grass is always greener on the other side of the world. But the grass is also green at your backyard if you choose to water it, to nurture it, and take a look at the talents that amongst ourselves. Because we really Malaysia boleh, right? Right, guys? Yes. Thank you. So, with that, we come back to this. Very much like the elderly man we saw earlier. We love our country and still clothe ourselves in a tattered hope. Because hope, no matter how bruised, is what keeps us standing. Hope is what motivates us to turn crisis into an opportunities. And hope is what drives us to believe that change is still possible if we navigate global transition. And that the Malaysia we continue to fight for, you continue to fight for, and to build only, not just to build only on pride and progress, but on empathy, resilience, and understanding. Together, we can do a Malaysia where stories matters, and then also a Malaysia where every voice is valued. Thank you.
There you have it. 4 Malaysian superheroes, each charting a path of discovery and preservation and showing us that courage is not the absence of uncertainty, but the will to move forward despite it. May the journeys inspire us to take our own leaps into the unknown in advancing Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me once again in showing our deep appreciation to our four amazing speakers for sharing their amazing journeys with us. On that note, thank you very much for your time and please enjoy the rest of the forum.
Thank you to these spectacular Malaysians for sharing their inspiring stories. Can we invite all of you and Edmund to the front for a photo? And to our guests, we'd love your feedback on the session, which you can give by scanning the QR code on the screen. Thank you all. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout KMF 2025, we have applied multifocal lenses to everything we have discussed. And right now, we will continue this with a deep dive into the Japanese economy, and this could not be any more pertinent as we continue to understand what a sustainable and inclusive future truly looks like. So, to introduce our next speaker, Professor Ulrike Schade, please welcome Sid Racy, Vice President, Research at Khazanah Nasional. Over to you, Racy.
When we think of Japan, we tend to think of Sony, Panasonic, or anime. But as Professor Ulrike Schade reminds us, Japan Insight actually runs much deeper, from Torei's carbon fiber in Boeing aircrafts, to Renesas semiconductors in our cars' brake systems, to even the Zojirushi rice cookers in our kitchens. But while others sprinted for the next big thing, Japan built the things that made everything run. Having spent decades studying Japan's companies and culture, Professor Schade has helped us understand Japan's transformation. One of my favorite stories from her book is Torei's bold bet on carbon fiber. Toray is a textile company that decided to invest in a space-age material no one needed at the time. Instead of fabric, Toray started weaving carbon. At the time, it seemed like such a risky niche. But today, that gamble underpins industries from aerospace to electric vehicles. And this is a lesson we can learn from the Japanese sumo wrestler Mai Nomi, smaller in size, but stronger through technique. Or as this year's KMF theme puts it, Japan is an ant, thriving through resilience and discipline in uncertain times. And what's striking is that Japan's definition of resilience is very different from the American one. In the US, resilience often means bouncing back quickly. In Japan, it means enduring steadily, adapting incrementally, preserving continuity, and finding strength in stability. Professor Schade brings this to life, showing us how Japan's quiet patience became its competitive edge amid turbulence. As Malaysia faces our own crossroads of risk and uncertainty, Professor Schade's keynote toward a more balanced capitalism in uncertain times invites us to ask, what can we learn from Japan's way of turning headwinds into strength? Please join me in welcoming Professor Ulrike Schade.
Well, thank you, Khazanah, for inviting me to this absolutely wonderful event, and thank you, Racy, for this lovely introduction. I look forward to discussing Japan more with you on a research basis. Today, what I want to do is I want to take you to Japan Not because Japan is necessarily all that great. I'll tell you what is great about Japan, or I'm not going to tell you to become like Japan, but rather we want to find out, is there anything we can learn from Japan? Because I think it gives us an alternative way of looking at capitalism. And so let me take you there. So, what I want to do for the next 25 minutes here is I want to talk about the quiet business reinvention that Japan has undergone over the last 30 years. I will argue that Japan has not been stagnant. It has been transforming itself. It has transforming itself from a made in Japan label to a Japan inside label. And as Wisi just said, I will talk about my favorite sumo wrestler, Mai Umi, in this context. I'll then address why it would take 30 years. That is a darn long time. Why 30 years? And I'll argue that slow is not stagnant. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And that'll get me to the topics that Wisi just mentioned, resilience and a different set of trade-offs as we think about capitalism. All right. So you go to Japan, or you open the newspaper, you read about Japan, it's all negative. You know, there's the stagnation and the deflation and the aging society and the government debt and the inefficiencies and the zombie companies. And that's all true. This is all true. Japan has a lot of problems. I'm not here to tell you that Japan is wonderful. It isn't. It's a country with problems, like every country has problems. But this cannot be the entire story. Because if it were the entire story, we could not explain this. How, after 30 years of nothing, is Japan still one of the largest economies in the world? Why did it not sink in the ocean or something? It's 30 years, a long time for this. And the answer is the last 3 decades were not lost or stagnant, that there was a period of transformation, but we can't see it because we're looking at Japan through an American lens. And I will develop this topic as I go. Maybe even more surprising is an index that many of you, certainly the good folks at Khazanah, know very well, which is the Economic Complexity Index. So this is, there are 2 indices. One was done by Harvard, one was done by MIT. It doesn't matter which one you use. What they do is they look at all the countries in the world. They look at the export basket. So everything that they export, there are data on this that go quite deep. And then they look at the diversity and the complexity of that basket, right? And the ubiquity of that basket. So for instance, a t-shirt is a product that a lot of countries can make. It's easy to make, it gets a low score. If you make a material for a semiconductor that only very few countries can make, then you get a high score. All right, and here's the MIT ranking. The upper line is Japan in red. And somebody has to explain to me how Japan can be number 1 over 30 years if there's only bad news. Right? Somehow we have to explain this. And by the way, the blue line in the middle is America, so I made that a little thicker. And it's down, but we have to be careful before we, rush to conclusions. So this is an export basket. In America, of course, exports a lot of rice or soybeans or whatever. But America also has data centers and AWS and Google and so forth, and that would not be included in that basket. So what makes America strong right now is actually not on this slide. So we don't want to. We're going to take this with a grain of salt. But I want to explain why Japan is the most economically complex country after 30 years of nothing, right? So allegedly nothing. Okay. And since this is an investor group, I thought I'd throw the stock price in. How do we explain this, right? Or how do we explain that Warren Buffett has put a lot of money into Japan lately? Yes, there is the exchange rate. Yes, there's maybe no other country good enough or something. Some portfolio adjustments. But no, we have to find a good story for this. All right. So So the typical narrative about how Japan has lost it is that after World War II, Japan was great at catching up with the West. Then came the bubble economy, and that was a big banking crisis. And after that, there was nothing. And now today, Japan can no longer compete. That's sort of the American version of what is a good economy. And Americans, of course, put a lot of emphasis on GDP growth. All right. So I would like to tell you a different story. And the different story is that the bubble economy actually marked Japan's arrival at the technology frontier. And Japan was no longer a follower. It had to change its business model to be a technology leader, just at a time when South Korea and then Taiwan and then China rose to become what Japan already had, namely a mass producer of consumer end products. Right? And so then came the banking crisis and people were preoccupied and so forth. But the CEOs of Japan's best companies began the transformation. And this transformation is what I want to tell you about. Okay, so this is the core image of this. So what we have here is the typical value chain of a manufactured product. Right? It starts with design and then all the way to retail. And in 1995, the CEO of Acer, the Taiwanese laptop company at the time, in a beer place on a napkin, drew this insight that the profits are not equally distributed across that thing. We now know this, but at the time that was actually a new thing. So what he did is he said, if we look at operating margin or some sort of measure of performance over the stages of production, we get a U-shaped curve. And this thing was U-shaped because of the arrival of China. Right? Now, that of course was always Japan's sweet spot. That is the Toyota production system. That is monozukuri. That is what Japan used to be great at. Make great cameras, make great rice cookers, make great oven toasters, all that sort of things, toaster ovens. So with the rise of China, that spot got taken. So strategy class, right? What do we do? Well, we could take on China, but there's the low cost advantage of China at the time, okay, so the answer is we move upstream. Japan had that value chain at home, right? With all the suppliers. So let's move upstream where the money is, which was first input parts, and then came South Korea and Samsung and so forth. Well, let's move more upstream into advanced materials, components, machinery, or, by the way, logistics. And if you think about this, by the way, this is Apple's business model, right? So they design their stuff in Cupertino, then they outsource everything in the middle in Asia and sell their phones to us in their glitzy retail stores. It is also the business model of Uniqlo, the Japanese Zara, right? So they design the heat tech and the airism, have everything made somewhere in Asia, and then they have these hyper efficient stores. So this is sort of a shift of the business model, and the Japanese companies that saw this early were also among those that said, okay, we're going to exit the consumer end product and move upstream where South Korea and Taiwan and China cannot yet compete. And as long as they can stay a step ahead, they can have a differentiated competitive position, right? All right. So the transformation of this is what's really interesting to me. So how did they do this, right? So what was the managerial challenge here? And so this made in Japan to Japan inside. Oh, and by the way, one more thing. Unlike the Intel machine in the old, where you open, maybe today even, you open it up and there's a little sticker saying Intel inside, there is no sticker on your phone, your computer, your car, your thermostat, your all kinds of things that you use on a daily basis, your car. There's no Japan Inside sticker. If there were a sticker, we would be stickered, with Japan Inside, because it turns out that Japan is the only country that, with the exception of the rare earth materials, can actually make the semiconductor all the way through. So everything that has a semiconductor has, I'll show you in a moment, has Japan inside. Right, so I became interested in this in 2010 when somebody put apart the first iPhone, and they looked at, okay, so who's creating the value added for the iPhone? And the answer was, at the time, 34% of this was made in Japan, and then 17% in Germany. There was one company that made these liquid crystals that float around in the glass thing. Right? And the value added of China in this process was actually much more limited. This is still true today. I didn't bring the data, but just believe me, so if we were to take apart the Huawei phone, it has a similar image. All right, so the managerial challenge was that after World War II, Japan had grown through big conglomerates. The industrial policies of Japan in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s were all geared towards size. The bigger, the better, right? And so, there were these Hitachis and Toshibas and so forth. We're all $100 billion companies with hundreds of thousands of employees around the world, and so forth and so on. And that after the bubble economy burst, it became clear they were just too slow, too bureaucratic. They had no competitive edge. So sumo is actually a really great image of this transformation that happened. I don't know to what extent you remember. This is the quintessential sumo guys. This is Akebono and Konishiki. They were the big guys in the early 90s. Konishiki was 300 kilograms, 184 centimeters. Akebono was even taller and 233 kilograms. And they created this image of sumo as these two big giants, right, clashing. My favorite sumo at the time was a fellow named Mainu Umi. He's actually shorter than I am, and I'll show you at the end a picture. He's barely more sizable than I am, and anyway, much more muscular still. But Mainu Umi measured 171 centimeters, and he realized that if he wanted to win against those guys, size was not his thing. He had to be smarter, faster, and more clever. And he became known as the department store of techniques. There's the Sumo Association has his waza, which is a technique. You could think of it as technologies, right? And he invented 33 new of these waza, and he won the technique award because he would prepare for almost every single bout to have a surprise move that the other larger guys could not do. So this is my image for the business transformation that is happening in places like Hitachi today, right? They go on a diet. The size is still good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with size. If Mainu had been bigger, maybe he had won even more, right? That's true. However, size alone will not win today in Asia, in Northeast Asia, or in the world, right? So size is great. Stronger the better, but that alone will not win. China will always be bigger, no matter what Japan does. It's clear. Location is destiny. So that's what it is. And so then the question is, can the competitors be somewhat more muscular, more focused, a different athlete, a smarter athlete that has superior strategies and can compete through technology and innovation? And that is the change that we're seeing. So you might think I'm giving you a strategy lecture, but let me give you some data that this is actually happening. And it's look a little bit daunting, but no worries, I'll explain it. This is data from the Japanese government. And what we have here is 5 industries. So they took 5 industries, 1,000 products, give or take. And what they're graphing is the combined market share of Japanese companies and the global size of that industry. So orange is automobiles. Right? And we know it's like a super huge industry, and there are these 2 big bubbles, and which are a combustion engine, and then the 2 smaller ones are hybrids. If you take everything together, Japan has a 30% market share in the global automobile industry. Right? We kind of knew that, Toyota and France. Okay, so yellow is automobile parts, and then blue is electronics, and teal is electronic parts, and pink is biotech. Right? So I looked at that chart, and rather than so first of all, it's only 5 industries. This is not the universe, right? So we have 5 industries, and I was much more interested in this Milky Way at the lower right-hand corner. what are those products where Japan has 100% market share? Because I don't have to spell this out, right? You have 100% market share. You can charge whatever you want, and you create trade dependencies and and supplier relationship dependencies. Having 100% market share means you're the only one that can produce this thing, right? Good, yeah. So I've called this the aggregate niche strategy. These are niches. On average, these markets are $3 billion, $2.5 billion, depending on the exchange rate. Right? But if you have like 500 of those, that adds up very nicely. So in the aggregate, these little dots are real power positions. Okay, so you might say this is nice. Don't all countries have this? And the answer is no. Not all countries have this. This is South Korea. And that's basically Samsung and LG, right? In these 5 industries. But cars and electronics happen to be the 2 industries where Korea is very strong. Taiwan, nothing. China, of course, is a force to reckon with. It's happening, right? So the strategic advice here is, well, you have to somehow stay ahead of China, because so this is, but yet there's not very much at the 100% level, right, in those 5 industries. The United States has a lot of biotech and, of course, semiconductors. And the biotech, we understand, right? The regulations are much more lenient.